All right, let's get started, everyone. So nice to have you with us this morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm David Severance. Delighted to be with you here. I'm one of the coaches at Chirag Shah Coaching. Welcome to our monthly leadership session. The monthly leadership sessions are intended to be a little bit different from the other everyday situations in that leadership is a different kind of a process from everyday management of your business. Many people think that leaders and leadership and management are the same thing. They really aren't at all. There are a lot of things that leaders need to think about if you're going to lead yourself effectively or lead your team effectively. There are a lot of things that you need to think about that those who are managing the everyday issues and challenges and problems of the business don't necessarily get involved in. For example, leaders need to think about strategic planning. Ask themselves questions like, where will the market be 12 months from today? And what do we need to be doing right now to prepare ourselves for that? Someone who's deep into the everyday solving of problems and issues probably isn't asking a question like that, spending much time thinking about it. Similarly, a manager might ask, are we serving our customers as well as possible today? A perfectly good question to ask and to think about. Whereas a leader might ask, who are the right customers for us and why? Or a manager might look at his or her business and say, am I doing everything right for the clients that I have? And is my team trained to do the same? Whereas a leader might say, are the members of my team growing? And so when you're focused on certain things every day in your business, you're managing problems, you're solving problems, you're making customers happy, which is the heartbeat of your business. But leadership requires some other questions and some other contemplation or reflection along the way. And so the programs that we do once a month on leadership are intended to be a little bit more contemplative in nature. Yes, we're going to give you everyday steps and tactics that you can apply to the business today to help you be more successful, profitable, and efficient. However, we want to introduce topics that require some more thought in the hope that you'll be thinking about these things over the course of your time too, whenever you have it, or even better than that, schedule some time to talk together with somebody on your team or someone else that you trust about these kinds of issues. So that said, today's issue, we're going to be looking at challenges, and we're going to use the word challenges in a very general sense today. We don't mean a specific objection or a specific problem that you might deal with in leading yourself or your business. We're going to just talk about it in a very general way, but you can think about, and I'll ask you in just a minute, what's a typical challenge that you face in your business on a daily basis, or at least frequently? So let me pull up today's deck and we'll get started. Okay. Do challenges have to be challenging? We have this experience of challenges and they're challenging, and that's what our life typically is all about, not just in our business, but in the rest of our lives. But if we take a step back and think about what are challenges fundamentally, what makes them challenging, and how can we respond, there's actually a lot of stuff in there that we can think about to help us manage challenges as effectively as possible. Let me start by asking you to just type into the chat box, what's a big challenge you have in leading yourself or your business? Just take a moment to write one sentence or less, a few words if that's sufficient. What is a challenge you typically face in leading yourself or your business? And I would need someone's help to help me read them off. Rachel, are you with us this morning or not? Didn't think so. Heidi, would you be kind enough to come off of mute and just read what's there so that we can all hear the challenges that people typically face in their business?
Sure, there's nothing here yet.
All right, could you guys just type in what's a typical challenge that you face in running your business, in leading yourself or leading your business? It can't all be peaches and cream, can it?
Grace says consistency and focus.
Okay, consistency and focus. What else?
Well, for me, I think it's, we've got organization. Marlita says organization and focus. Carla, consistency. Oh, it's Marlene using her daughter's computer. Okay. And I'm waiting for, okay. Starting a team for the first time and being unsure of the exact path forward, and then time management.
Yep.
So far, that's it.
That's it. Come on, guys. Let's be contemplative here. Leaders need to contemplate. If I ask you, what's a big challenge you face in leading yourself or your business? If you can't think about and understand or articulate what challenges you have, how can you solve them? So let's hear from one or two more folks.
Ernie says motivating team members.
Okay, sure. How do you get them motivated? How do you keep them motivated?
Myself personally, I think sometimes it might be looking at your business plan and adjusting if you need to.
Yes. So all of these issues, thank you for putting them in there, and thank you, Heidi. All of these issues are ones that we face in leading ourselves and leading our teams on a regular basis. Some of them are more like strategic, like, how should I apportion my time management? How should I work with a business plan for myself? Others are more situational, right? How do I motivate somebody? How do I give feedback to a team member that's not performing at the right level? How do I get someone to, follow through on their commitments? These kind of challenges. How do I respond to a client who's telling me that he or she doesn't like the way I handled something? Right? So many issues are typical in the business setting. Here's the reality. The reality is, and this is kind of a funny statement, challenges are not inherently challenging. And this is the big point for today's contemplative message. That is, we tend to think that the situation is challenging because the situation inherently is challenging. But the reality is, the reason that a situation or well, let's just call it a situation, is challenging is not because it's inherently challenging, but it's because of how we experience or interpret that situation. Let me give you a couple of examples. If I asked you to plan a formal dinner for 300 people, some of you might say, oh my God, I can't do that. I wouldn't know where to begin. That's extremely challenging. However, if you ask someone else who happens to be an event planner to plan an event for 300 people, no problem at all. Similarly, if I said to you, I'd like you to please raise 7 children, you might say, oh my gosh, forget it. I've raised 2. I couldn't imagine raising 7. That's impossible. But for some people, it's not. Some people do just fine raising 7. In fact, some people run orphanages and foster homes for 15, 20, or 30 kids. And to put it more in kind of like the terms of the business, what if I say to you, how do you feel about firing somebody? You might say, oh, that's terrible. I never want to do it. I hate it. I had to fire this one person. I put it off month after month after month, finally got to it. It was awful. But it's not challenging for everybody. Some leaders out there recognize that firing someone, as difficult as it may be, is actually just business. The person's not the right fit. It's time for them to move on. In order for the businesses to be successful, you just need to get in there and do it. It's not personal. It's not emotional. It's just business. And so that mindset helps them move through that situation in a way that it's not particularly challenging for them. And the final example, how about receiving feedback from a client about yourself or from one of your teammates about something that they didn't think you did well? For many of us, that's a very challenging situation. But some of us who have worked at that a bit, or maybe see feedback as like the key to high performance, receive the feedback in a way that's not particularly challenging at all. And so the point here is, the challenge is not inherent in the situation itself. It's in how we interpret the situation personally and how we experience it. That means it's all in here. It's not out there. Another proof of this is something that could be challenging for you, like getting up and speaking in front of 100 people, could be challenging for you if you had to do it one time, maybe the first time. But if you had to do it every week, week after week after week for 3 years, after a while, it wouldn't be challenging for you anymore. And so if it was inherently in the situation, it would never get easier for you. But the reason it gets easier is because our interpretation of it, our experience of it shifts. And so this is a very big learning for us, because the opportunity for us to overcome the challenges in our life is not just to avoid the certain situations that cause those things, but mostly it's doing the work in here that helps us interpret them or manage them in a different way. And this is where the interpretive or contemplative part of leading ourselves comes in. So let's look at a couple of specific characteristics of what tends to make challenging situations challenging. 4 items here. There are more, but these are kind of like the big 4. The first is when you recognize that something threatens the achievement of a goal that matters to you. That is, the stakes are high. You say, oh my gosh, this person, let's say it's a well-known person in town, and they tweet out a message to all of their followers in town that they got bad service from somebody on your team. Immediately you think, oh my gosh, this is bad for my business. How am I going to achieve my sales goals this year with, the ex-mayor out there tweeting about how something got screwed up in their situation, right? Immediately, the stakes are high. Whether you articulate it or you just kind of feel it viscerally, you recognize that your goal achievement is threatened. That's number one. Number two, sometimes situations are unanticipated. They just came out of the blue. You got a situation that you weren't anticipating, you hadn't planned for, you didn't have any strategy for mitigating it. It just dropped right in your lap, and now you've got to deal with it. That can cause a lot of stress in any of us, and it's natural if it does. Third characteristic, when we recognize that solving the issue is going to cost a significant amount of time, effort, or money. We never seem to have enough time, effort, or money, right? We don't have enough of those resources. And so when something comes to us that's going to require a significant amount of them, we know it's going to take away from somewhere else. And so if somebody gives you a big, hairy problem and you know that there's something that you need to do about it, and the only way through is to spend a lot of time working at it, spend a lot of effort, or it's going to cost you some money, naturally, that's going to make it challenging. And finally, it triggers an emotional response. Very often when something happens to us, let's say that the ex-mayor tweets out a bad experience that they had working with someone on your team, it causes an immediate emotional response in you, which is fear. Oh my gosh, I'm afraid that this is really going to kill my business. What am I going to do about this? And I'd like to just suggest to you, do you ever use the word stress? I'm so stressed. I'm stressed out. I wish I wasn't so stressed all the time. I'd like you to think about this. Stress equals fear. What we always say about stress in our work is stress is actually unresolved emotional energy. And it's almost always fearful energy. And so, for example, let's say you got a letter from the government, and the government says, we are going to audit you. Immediately, you might get nervous about it, right? Oh my gosh, what are they auditing me for? I hope I didn't make a mistake. I didn't mean to make a mistake. And now they're going to look at all my finances. I don't know if I have all the records. It's going to be a disaster. And you're going to be in that state for the next 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever, because that situation has made you quite fearful naturally. However, if you got another letter 2 weeks later, which said, whoops, our mistake, it's a different David Severance that we're investigating, not you. We sent that letter to the wrong place. Immediately, your fear would dissipate. You'd say, I'm fine. Or maybe you've experienced the same thing where the cop is coming behind you while you're driving on the highway and the lights are on and you think the cop is after you, and maybe your heart starts beating or your palms get sweaty or something. And then the cop goes by you because the cop is chasing somebody else, and you're like, okay, it wasn't me, right? That emotional experience gets ramped up by the initial interpretation. Oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. And then immediately when the evidence is it's not about me, it goes back down again. So our emotional experience is highly stressful. And if we experience stress, or we say to ourselves, or other people say to us often, I'm so stressed all the time, what's really happening is we're experiencing a fearful interpretation of a circumstance around us. And this is where the leadership part comes in, because we need to manage ourselves in these situations. The challenge is inherent to us, not to the situation itself. So let's talk about how a leader can respond to each of these situations. The first one, when a situation threatens your goal achievement, there are many things you can do. 3 of them are right here, and you could choose any one of these and help yourself greatly in a situation like that. First, ask for help. Chances are you're a person that may not ask for help often enough. Studies have shown a lot of people feel like they don't ask for help as much as they think they ought to. And they also say that other people don't ask them for help that they could offer, close friends or family members, that they could often give. There's something in our culture for many of us that kind of dissuades us from asking for help. I don't know if it's an idea that, we got to solve our own problems, or we don't want to bother anybody else, or we don't want to admit that we don't have the solution. But sometimes simply saying to yourself, I need help here with this, and finding somebody who can help you, whether it's an extra pair of hands, or it's somebody to help you think through it, or somebody to loan you money so you can solve the problem, whatever it is, ask for help. Let me just ask you, can you put into the checkbox, Are you a person who sometimes hesitates to ask for help from others? Yes or no? Heidi, please let us know what we're getting there. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, 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 and yes. B says no.
Okay, got it. So our work with many people around the world in large businesses, large businesses and small. No, come on. Okay. In large businesses and small is we tend to hesitate to ask for help, but one of the best ways you can help yourself or your team through this is ask for help because somebody you know has a way of supporting you. Second, change the parameters of your goal. If your goal was, let's say, to update your whole CRM by the end of the day today, and now something unanticipated has dropped in your lap, and it's kind of getting in the way of your original plan today to get the CRM updated. Change the parameters. The parameters are time, or completeness, or accuracy. You could say, for example, well, you know what? I don't need to get it all updated by today. In fact, I could do it by noon tomorrow. Problem solved. Sometimes we need to give up on something in order to feel better about it so we can keep ourselves moving. Another way might be, well, you know what? I don't have to do the whole thing today. Let me just do half of them today. And that's my new goal. Instead of updating all 1,000 contacts in there, I'll do 500 and I'll feel good about that at the end of the day. So sometimes simply changing the parameter of your goal can make all the difference to something that threatens your goal achievement in how you experience it. Third, do an accelerated brainstorm. One way to solve a problem when something is threatening your goal achievement, especially if it was unanticipated, which we'll talk more about in a minute, is to do an accelerated brainstorm. An accelerated brainstorm is a very simple, short brainstorm session intended to help you get to an answer quickly. What you do is you take a very short period of time, could be a minimum of 10 minutes. 15 minutes works fine for most cases. You call up one person you know who you think is a good thinker, who understands your business or understands you or could have some kind of a perspective on the situation. And you say, I'd like to do an accelerated brainstorm. Can we at 12 o'clock today just talk for 15 minutes about this problem that just came to me? They say, sure, I'd love to talk at 12 o'clock. Boom. Pick up the phone at 12 o'clock, 12:15, you stop. 90% of the time, you end up with an acceptable response or an acceptable solution within those 10 to 15 minutes. If you've never tried an accelerated brainstorm, practice it a couple of times. See if it helps you achieve something that you wouldn't otherwise achieve. It's very often much more effective than we expect. Okay, next. Responding as a leader when the situation is unanticipated. 3 things you can do here. 1, remember that life is like a box of chocolate. Remember Forrest Gump? Anybody ever see the movie Forrest Gump? In Forrest Gump, the lead character, Forrest, was always told by his mother, life is like a box of chocolate. You never know what you're going to get. And guess what, folks? Sometimes just remembering that is all you need to kind of bring your emotions down a little bit and just say, you know what? That's right. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. This is what I got today. Yesterday, I got something great. Today, I got something lousy. Maybe tomorrow, I get something great again. That's just the way life is. Second, schedule some time to think about why you were unprepared or surprised. Why is it that this one got past you? You've been in business for 9 years now. You know everything there is to know. You've seen it all 1,000 times before. How did this situation evade your experience or your knowledge or your talent? There's something there for you to learn as a leader of yourself or your team. Whenever something unanticipated comes, it's like a bell ringing saying, hey, here's a learning opportunity. And so instead of simply solving the problem, what you can do, schedule some time sometime soon after that, a day later, 2 days later, a week later, to think about it a little bit and ask yourself, why did this happen? How did I miss this? How might I have some kind of a mitigating strategy or some kind of a sensor out there so that I can anticipate something like this happening again? So you turn the unanticipated challenge into a strength going forward. And third, build unscheduled time into your calendar. If things happen to you from time to time that are unanticipated and need to be dealt with, there's time that's needed to deal with them. And many of us tend to schedule our calendar block to block to block all the way to the end of the day. That means we have no extra capacity to manage something that's unanticipated. So consider the value for you of building in some unscheduled blocks of time in your schedule. It could be 1 hour on Monday, 1 hour Wednesday, 1 hour Friday. And if nothing unanticipated comes up that you have to deal with, that's fine. You can keep pushing ahead with your other goals. And you may end up achieving what you want to achieve by the end of the day earlier anyway. But you have that time and you make the commitment to say, this is for something that comes up that I don't think I have enough time for otherwise. So I'm going to ask you when we're done here in a few minutes, which ones of these do you want to employ? So I hope you're writing it down or thinking which one of these might be useful for you to apply in your work. Next, when you recognize the solution is going to cost you a significant amount of time, energy, effort, or money, two things to do here. One, you need to remember that this is just the cost of business. These things happen sometimes. There's nothing you can do about certain things that are unanticipated. There's nothing you can do about certain challenges. You're running the business as well as you can, but there are certain costs here. And sometimes there are significant financial costs or time or energy costs. But the point of this is actually the entrance ticket. This is what makes it possible for you to do what you get to do every day. And if you're happy doing this work and this is how you want to spend your life, this is what makes your life the life it is and the life that you want, just recognize that that's just the entrance ticket to get you there. These things will happen. Secondly, make sure that you really take an assessment of what the cost is, especially if things happen to you frequently, if you're frequently challenged by certain situations or a variety of situations keep coming up and keep kind of dragging you back financially or time-wise. Try to quantify that so that you understand what the true cost is here. It's very easy to underestimate the cost of these things. If, for example, the same kind of situation comes up again and again and again, and you're not recognizing it, it's costing you more every single time it happens. And so if you can do some kind of an assessment and just take your GCI per hour, or your hourly value as a worker on your team, and you add that up, multiply that by the number of hours you're spending on certain types of challenges, you can say, my gosh, I left $2,000 on the table this week because I was happy I had to deal with XYZ. And if that's happening regularly for you, you're leaving a lot of money on the table by the end of the year. So simply tracking the cost of it in whatever form you use helps you understand if this is something serious that you really need to make a change about going forward or not. Finally, when they trigger an emotional response, there are many things you can do. I'm going to recommend a couple of books here in a minute too. But first, for many people, one useful tactic is to simply take a break, count to 10, or remind yourself to breathe. Very often our emotional response, it triggers the fight or flight within us. And so our heartbeat races, our breathing might get hurried. We might start to get a headache or pain in the back of our neck, or our hands might get sweaty, right? You're familiar with like getting butterflies in your stomach before you speak in front of a group or take a big exam or deal with a very important client or something like that, right? Sometimes simply just taking a break to reconnect with yourself, breathe, count to 10. If you're into yoga or anything like that, as you know that there's ways to relax and calm yourself. Sometimes that's a step you need to take just so that you can push on. Second, reserve time to think about the threat. You can't probably do this in the moment, but it's really valuable over the long term to lead yourself by reflecting when you can on what happened in a particular situation. Was it that you anticipated a very scary and risky conversation that you had to have with a client or a teammate, or with Compass, for example? And what's the threat there? What's the nature of the threat? For most people, the triggering of this fight or flight response in us comes from a perception of threat, not a physical threat, although that's kind of where the biology originally comes from, but it's a threat to our finances, relationships, or reputation. And so if you think if you think about it later on and you realize, my gosh, if I had lost this client, I would have lost, this. That's a threat to your finances. Or if you say, my relationship with my coworker was really going south here. My teammate, we used to have a great relationship and it's been going south and I was afraid I'm going to lose that. That could be scary too. And finally, reputation. If something happens out there that affects your reputation in the community, your membership in the community, if you will, there's no surprise that it's going to feel like a threat. And so think about which one of these is threatened. What we often find is for each of us, whether we have like a sweet spot of trouble, call it like a trouble zone. Maybe we're often so worried about our reputation that that's where we always get triggered. Or we're often worried about finances and that's where we get triggered. Or something else. If you can understand that there's a theme there for you, then you can recognize that next time it happens, this is simply your body's self-protection mechanism. I grew up really poor and I don't want to be poor anymore. And so I kind of have a thing about finances in my life. And when something comes into my life that threatens the stability of my finances, that's just my body saying, oh my gosh, let's not make this happen. So this is part of the contemplative nature of what we're talking about as a leader. So let me stop sharing here. I'd like to just hear from a couple of you, please. Take yourself off mute, turn on your video if you're able, and let's hear from one or two of you. What is a step that you would like to take out of any of these that were mentioned here? What's something that you want to focus on going forward? Who will we hear from first? Allie, how about you? I saw you writing down a bunch of things. Would you mind sharing which one is coming up for you as something you'd like to try?
Yes, I mean, I start things in each category.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think changing the parameters of my goals is helpful for me. I think sometimes I try to do too much at once or set something unreasonable. So thankfully, like my junior agent will remind me at times, like, you don't have to do this by like tomorrow. You could take a week or something. And I'm like, oh yeah, I could. And I think the accelerated brainstorm thing too, because I do have someone that's like not on my team, but we worked together previously who I think could help me come up with like some solutions when I need them. And then just I think scheduling time to reflect on stuff is good for me too. I need that time to problem solve or figure out why someone was upset, etc.
Thank you. This is the issue about thinking about this stuff, folks. If you're spending all of your life in your business just solving the problems of today, you're not growing the business and you're not growing yourself. And the way that you scale the business over time is growing yourself and growing your team, growing their capabilities, growing their relationships, growing their skills. It's about growing, right? If nothing ever advances individually, nothing advances for the company. And so this contemplative piece about being self-aware about who we are, how we're leading ourselves, where we're doing things well, where we're not doing things well, is so crucial to our growth over time. Let's hear one more person, please. Which one are you going to be working with going forward? Marilda, how about you?
Well, I was looking at the accelerated brainstorm. I always get confused and I always get overwhelmed, whatever I have to do. And I think I have to be scheduling better my time so I can just go over everything I have to do because I always run off time and then I get frustrated. And so that's one of the main things that I have to think about. And then I get stressed all the time. That is my normal time in life, that I'm always stressed. And I cannot be producing, I think, what I could do it, because I am always running around things that maybe I don't need to do, and schedule my time, and time management will be and focus on it and not deviate it.
Got it. So many of us spend so many of our days working so hard and never getting as much done as we want, and then we get stressed out about it. Is that what you wanted your experience to be when you first got into this business? I want to work all day and at the end of the day feel frustrated and stressed. Probably not. It's pointing to us the opportunity that we have to lead ourselves differently somehow, to use these techniques, to use the tools that you get here or wherever you get them, to talk with your colleagues and find different ways of doing things. But if we spend 30 years, let's say, in this business, always feeling like we never got enough done every day, not getting enough done and feeling stressed, from my point of view, that's a shame. The business might be very successful financially, but if we're an emotional wreck or we're a kind of a mental wreck, that's too bad. And so there's an opportunity for all of us to keep thinking about how are we leading ourselves? How are we showing up in our business? What are the tactics that we're using that help us get everything that we want out of the business? So let me recommend, for those of you who'd like to think about this a little bit more, you're welcome. I'd like to recommend 3 books that are worth considering anyway. I don't know, for those of you who are big readers, these books have been cited by many, many other people as useful to them in their own thinking. So I'll just share them with you and you can take a look. One is called Mindset by Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K. Carol Dweck, Mindset. This has been a kind of a bestseller book for folks who think about, how do I think about things? How do I prepare myself to work effectively with others? Mindset by Carol Dweck. Second, for those of you who might find yourself fearful or anxious a lot of the time or stressed out a lot of the time, tied to a fearful idea about like what's going to go wrong, a great book to read is called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. It's an easy read. Many people have found it very useful for them to just find an easier way to push through that fear that comes up when we think about what we face. Allie says she read it. She says it was great. And one final book, and you'll see all 3 of these books are very different. This one's called When Things Fall Apart. It's by a lady named Pema Chodron. Pema Chodron is a Buddhist, a Canadian Buddhist, and she runs a retreat center in Canada, but she speaks all over the US. She's written several books. This particular book talks about how we kind of interpret the disasters around us or the challenges around us, and how we can perhaps think differently about them. So there may be some nuggets in here that could become really useful for you in moving yourself forward. So all 3 of these books are books that many, many people have found useful in their own self-development and running their businesses. And if you choose any of them, I would love to hear how it works for you. So, and for any of these tactics from today that you apply in your business, send a message back to Chirag and me about how it worked out for you. Finally, whenever you use any of these tactics, do it more than once. Practice it a little bit, because a lot of these things take a little practice, like an accelerated brainstorm that Ali mentioned. It's not easy to do it right. You know, it takes a little practice to figure out what are the right questions to ask, how to interact with this other person. How do I move myself towards identifying a particular solution? It takes a little practice. And all of these things do. So whatever you take out of today or any of our sessions here, practice it a number of times over 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks to decide whether it's a tactic that can work for you forever. Okay, let me see if there's any final comments here in the chat. Read 1 and 2, read 1 and 3, not 2. Okay, got it. Great. So thank you everybody for being here. It's a delight to have you with us, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow when we'll be talking about how do we use different communication modes like texting versus phone versus emails versus Zoom. So thanks everybody for being here. Have a great day today, and let us know how things go for you. Bye-bye.